Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the FifthxxChild podcast, the weekly podcast where I, your podcaster Chris, give you two different recommendations either for video games, movie, television series, or anime. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to make this episode a really short episode. Luckily, I had an idea for this last week. I knew that I needed to probably come up with some sort of contingency just in case these holiday seasons got a little bit too busy for me. And unfortunately, yeah, we were in the holiday season and things got kind of busy. And unfortunately, I don't really have the chance or time to be able to record a full-length episode because the full-length episode that I had in mind was going to be over Pokemon Sword and Shield, which I have actually played Pokemon Sword and I have played it all the way through to the end of the main story. And I've actually clocked in almost 26 hours into the main story and almost 20 extra hours just doing extras. So there's definitely actually a lot I want to talk about the game, and a majority of it is actually kind of positive. But the kind of in-depth, the kind of deep dive into the game that I was looking for is likely going to have to be more reserved for a longer podcast, and unfortunately I just don't have the time right now to sit down and talk about that. But luckily, I had an idea last week for what I wanted to do, and that is because the new television series on Disney Plus, and by extension, Disney Plus is now out, is the new Star Wars miniseries, The Mandalorian. I'm going to call it a miniseries. It's a miniseries or a split-up 6-hour-long movie. So I really wanted to talk about that because, frankly, I have been more excited for The Mandalorian than I was for Rise of Skywalker. I'm still excited for The Rise of Skywalker, but I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I think the reason why is because I feel for it being the conclusion to this whole entire Skywalker saga thing, I'm afraid that it's going to be kind of anticlimactic. I'm afraid it's not going to be able to stick the landing as nearly much as I would hope it could, but I am excited for that. But I was definitely more excited for The Mandalorian, and my main reason being is that it is a brand new kind of Star Wars story that's disconnected from any main characters that we know about. At least so far. We haven't run into any Skywalkers yet, so I was very excited about this. I like the fact that it's going to be focused on, I like the fact that it was supposed to be focused on the kind of seedy underbelly of Star Wars, which hasn't really been focused on too much, but in all of the good, even in some of the worst Star Wars movies, like, say, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones or Rogue One, getting to see that seedy underbelly was always probably the best part of it. So I was really excited for this. So I just want to go ahead and just jump right in to talk about how I feel about the series so far. This far, I've only seen the first 2 episodes. I believe the 3rd episode did indeed come out probably yesterday. I didn't have a chance to talk about it, have a chance to watch it yesterday. Otherwise, I probably will be talking about it now. So that's kind of the idea I want to do. I want to give just short little impressions on every single episode as they come out, and I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the first 2 episodes. There will be some mild spoilers in this podcast episode. So if you want, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and talk over some of the spoilers as we go through it. If I run into anything that I think could be technically spoiler territory, I will mention it. I will mention that there will be a spoiler, and then at that point in time, I'm just going to give you a little tag at the very end, that a tag in the description that tells you when you can skip those spoilers. So The Mandalorian is a new Star Wars television series that's on Disney Plus. That is executive produced by Jon Favreau, the original director of Iron Man 1 and 2, The Jungle Book, and also The Lion King. And Jon Favreau is definitely a strong director. He's a very good storyteller. He's a very good visual storyteller. And honestly, I think he's probably one of the best choices to possibly headline a Star Wars property to date. If I'm being totally honest, I think I would be totally okay with him being in charge of Lucasfilm, but that's just between me and you, and all you listeners who are listening in on this. It's also executively produced by Dave Filoni, who had also been the main, one of the co-creators behind the Star Wars The Clone Wars series, which is a television series that is really good. It's a really good cartoon series. I'm glad to see Dave Filoni's in charge of this. And the main story of The Mandalorian is just simply focused on this guy called The Mandalorian, or this bounty hunter. So for those of you quite unaware of your Star Wars lore, You probably be able to tell this just by looking at the main character and his clear design and his armor being based upon Boba Fett, one of the more popular characters from the original trilogy. What the Mandalorians are a tribe-like warrior, are a warrior-like tribe that dates far back beyond the Old Republic, thousands of years before the beginning of Star Wars Episode 1, and they are just a warrior tribe that has survived simply on honor, defeating their enemies, and then trying to make their way in the universe. And then as we get into the era of the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, the Mandalorians decided that their best way to survive was to take up bounty hunter work. And that's what our main character's focused on, is our main character played by Pedro Pascal, otherwise known as the Mandalorian, who takes a lot of inspiration from whose overall character traits take a lot of inspiration from the old style westerns of the Clint Eastwood variety and of old John, more likely Clint Eastwood, basically more, I would say mostly based upon the Dollars trilogy, A Few Dollars More, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, A Fistful of Dollars. He's certainly based on The Man with No Name, and the entire story is just basically focused around him taking up this one specific contract to find this unmarked, un-ID'd person of interest and to bring them either back home, dead or alive, and regain his money. And this is where the series does a really good job, is that the series does a great job at subverting kind of some of the expectations that you would come to expect from a story like this. For example, one of the things I was kind of worried about going into this, I was afraid that the Mandalorian himself was going to be very stoic, kind of unlikable, kind of a jerk, a silent protagonist who didn't have really much to say. And the Mandalorian actually has a lot to say. I was kind of worried for the first 10 or so minutes of the first episode. The first 2 minutes are awesome. He goes into a tavern, a cantina, in order to find his bounty, and then he gets in a brawl fight with some drunken patrons, and then he manages to capture the bounty he was looking for. And throughout this entire time, he probably has all of 2 things to say. And I was kind of afraid of that. I was afraid they were going to make him a strong, silent, stoic type, which is a little cliched. But he actually has a lot of he also has some pretty decent one-liners throughout most of the episode. They're not like MCU level one-liners, but still they're pretty funny, and they show that he does have a character beyond just being completely silent. There's a lot of other characters introduced as well that we don't know exactly we don't know so far what kind of impact they have on the story. But there's the leader of the Bounty Hunter Guild that the Mandalorian is in, Grief Karga, who's played by Carl Weathers, who, if you do not know your 70s and 80s movies all that well, Carl Weathers is the man who played, is the actor who played Apollo Creed in the Rocky trilogy, in the original Rocky movies. And also he was Dylan in Predator. I had to say that in a Schwarzenegger voice. So he's definitely, it's nice to see action hero stars like this get a little bit more, get some more screen time and stuff like this. You also get to see Nick Nolte, who hasn't been in a movie that I thought was important in a long time. And from what we know, Gina Carano, the MMA fighter turned, I think she was MMA. Yeah, I think she was MMA. Who the MMA fighter turned actress, and I believe Giancarlo Esposito is supposed to be in the series as well. I don't know who his character is yet. Giancarlo Esposito is one of my favorite actors working to date, and that's mostly just because of Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. So I'm interested to see what he's gonna play, and the second episode that's kind of what I want to talk about with the first episode. The second episode also does a really, really good job at showing exactly some of the humanity of the Mandalorian. At the end of the first episode, we learn about the bounty. We know what the bounty is that the Mandalorian is trying to find. And then the Mandalorian almost seems like he has a change of heart and decides that he wants to bring this bounty in alive, and almost begins to develop some sort of connection with this bounty. And you get to see that in episode 2 a lot, as I think episode 2 is definitely a little bit more action-heavy, less story-driven than the first episode. There's a lot more action stuff that happens in the second episode, which is all great. There's also some great humor in there as well. Like I said, one of the things I was worried about The Mandalorian is that he was just going to be kind of that Boba Fett type, but he's actually got a lot of personality to him. There's also a good questionable moral compass that surrounds him as well, which I would like to see more of. I think this kind of series is exactly what I thought Rogue One was going to be like, and unfortunately Rogue One kind of tiptoed over the moral questionability a lot, and I feel like this series is setting itself up for the Mandalorian himself to be a very, very complex character. Besides that, I'm not going to talk about the spoilers right now. I'll leave that to the very end, and that way, I'll leave that to the very end, so I'll kind of get my thoughts about that later. The series itself actually has multiple directors working on it. As far as I know, Dave Filoni had directed the first episode, and then another director, I think his name is Rick Fumikua. I don't know what else he's really done. From what I know, Deborah Chow, who's another TV director, who is currently going to be the director of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus, which I'm excited about that. I believe she's done episode 3 of The Mandalorian, which I haven't seen yet. And then I know for a fact that also Bryce Dallas Howard is supposed to be directing an episode 2, which I didn't even know she was a director. Bryce Dallas Howard, for example, if you didn't know, is the actress daughter of Ron Howard, and if there's any recent films you know her from, they're likely the Jurassic Park movies, the Jurassic World movies, I mean. And then I know for a fact that Taika Waititi is directing the final episode of the series, Taika Waititi being the director of Thor Ragnarok, and one of my favorite directors to date, so I'm excited to see what he's going to do with that episode. But other than that, I think every single episode definitely has a nice, consistent tone to it. Just as The Mandalorian himself is influenced by Clint Eastwood in The Man with No Name, the series itself definitely has a Western vibe to it, much more so than Solo. And you can definitely see that in the music as well. The music is composed by Ludwig Göransson, who is most well known for his collaborations with director Ryan Coogler. Ryan Coogler, who directed Fruitvale Station, Creed, and also recently Black Panther. And for my money, I think Göransson's score for Black Panther is one of the best soundtracks in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even if I think the movie's just pretty okay, or it's pretty good. Not the greatest movie ever, like some critics thought it was back last year. It's not the best MCU film by any means, but I did think it was a pretty good movie. The soundtrack for The Mandalorian has similar beats to that, similar tone, has a similar tone to it. There's a lot of tribal there's a little bit of a tribal theme to it as well, with a lot of Western undercurrents as well. And the main theme itself is definitely encompasses all those themes into once. So yeah, there's a lot for me to like in The Mandalorian, and I'm interested to see where the story's going to turn out. And from this point on, I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you do not want to hear anything about spoilers whatsoever, honestly, this is probably the part when you can probably go ahead and just finish up the you can go ahead and probably finish up the episode at this point, because I'm not going to talk about anything else after this. So if you want to go ahead and listen to some spoilers, this is the end of the non-spoiler discussion, so thank you for stopping by. I'm going to go ahead and go straight into the spoilers. So we find out at the end of the very end of the first episode, the hit that the Mandalorian was looking for is a Baby Yoda thing. If you're big on Star Wars, you know exactly who Yoda is, the old wizened Jedi Master who trained multiple generations of Jedi and Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy. And the person the Mandalorian was trying to find was a little tiny Baby Yoda thing. I don't remember what race Yoda was, so it's definitely not just a Baby Yoda, but it's definitely a baby alien thing that looks like Yoda. And that is super interesting because I don't know exactly what that means. I'm interested to see what kind of plan that they have for this Baby Yoda. It kind of makes a little bit of sense because in the first episode, the client who contracted the Mandalorian to look for the Baby Yoda seemed as though he had some Imperial ties to the Galactic Empire. So the Mandalorian itself takes place about 5 or so years after Return of the Jedi. So at this point in time, the Galactic Empire is no more. The rebellion has been trying to rebuild the Galactic Republic from scratch after the Galactic Empire destroyed it. So I'm interested to see exactly what this client is looking for, why he's looking for this Baby Yoda. I'm interested to see what kind of plan there is, and if anything, I'd be interested to see how this is going to go into the next, how this could factor into the Rise of Skywalker. One of the things I heard from the rumor mill is that the executives of Disney, such as Bob Iger, have all stated that in order to truly understand the next wave of Marvel Cinematic Universe films, you might need to watch the Marvel TV series on Disney+, and I'm starting to think that you might need The Mandalorian for future Star Wars films. Probably even The Rise of Skywalker, because I feel like there is a plan for this Baby Yoda that could maybe come up again in Rise of Skywalker. Again, I don't know. Either or, I'm still going to enjoy it no matter what, because even on its own, this series still works really, really well. So yeah, I think that's it for my little discussion about The Mandalorian. Again, I hate to call it quits right now, but I just have unfortunately way too little time. I do not have much time on my hands. But luckily, I think this is a nice little contingency plan where I can just upload a mini episode that's just reviewing the newest episode of The Mandalorian every so often. So yeah, I want to thank you guys so much for listening in, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode.